we don't do stress at the AA. We do peace of mind, from roadside rescue to car, home or travel insurance. Relax. Yellow and Black have got your back.
The C4 is Citroën's bread and butter, or perhaps brioche, family hatchback that has always been a bit of an also-ran compared to the likes of the Volkswagen Golf, Ford Focus and Opel Astra. It was always a little cheaper than its key rivals, usually came with decent equipment, but ultimately fell down in areas such as quality. Plastics felt brittle, electrics could become troublesome, and the cars felt tatty after a few years of use. But now Citroën are back with an all-new C4, and it comes with quite a breadth of choice. You have a petrol, you have a diesel, and of course you have an electric. This is the e-C4, and it comes with the family's 100 kilowatt electric motor twinned with a 50 kilowatt battery. Citroën haven't been enjoying the greatest of fortunes in Ireland. Last year in 2020 they sold just 875 units. That's less than 1% of the Irish car market. Meanwhile, they're looking up at sister brand Peugeot, reaching over 5% with a great product range. So Citroën are back with a new product range, this being front and centre. Is this enough to get Citroën back right up to the places where they feel they should be? Citroën are very proud of the fact that this car sits higher up than most of its key rivals and has greater ground clearance. So they've certainly gone for an SUV look with the C4. Plus there's a throwback to some of the previous models such as the C4 Cactus with some of these air bumps at the side. It is a handsome car overall. It has elements from other brands. There's a little bit of Honda Civic here and possibly the Toyota CHR2. It's probably at the back where this car is its most dramatic. That sloping roofline, Citroën tell us, actually improves the WLTP range of the EV by about 10% compared to the equivalent DS3 Crossback, which we drove a couple of weeks ago. There's quite a dramatic rear spoiler here, and also this light arrangement looks something like you'd see on a Honda Civic, but it is a very good looking car. This isn't perhaps its best colour. We've seen it in black and it looks really nice. So let's have a look at this cabin. Well, the steering wheel is quite sane compared to some of Citroën's ones of old. It is a multi-function wheel as standard on all models, so you have obviously your cruise control functions here, you have your volume switches, and you can go through your various menus here. In the center console is obviously dominated by this 10-inch display. Now you do have a USB-C and a standard USB port. Now it's worth noting that in order to operate CarPlay, you need to use the USB-C. There's also some standard controls and standard dials here. The air conditioning is a series of buttons, traditional buttons and dials, which work nicely. Obviously, some other brands use just everything on the touchscreen, but no, this is just reserved for CarPlay and for the other navigation functions as well. This is a 10-inch screen as standard, so even at entry point you get this screen, which is excellent. Another interesting feature is this iPad holder. So you put the case around your iPad, then it goes into this slot here. Luggage capacity is a rather useful 380 litres, and that doesn't change in the e-C4. Underneath the boot floor you can store your cables. You do get the standard Type 2 and you do get the so-called granny cable where you can charge the car on a 3-point plug. Just a quick note on charging. So it is a CCS charger. It will charge at 100 kilowatts, where you will find a charging point like that, say for example at Ionity or at Junction 14 in Mayfield on the newer ESP chargers. It will charge to 80% at 100 kilowatts in about 30 minutes. Otherwise on a 50 kilowatt one it'll charge to 80% in about 60 minutes. When it comes to price, this is where we can start handing out the gold stars to the Citroën C4. It starts at a scarcely believable €24,730 for what is quite a substantial car. Albeit for a 1.2 petrol with 100 horsepower, you're better off spending about £3 more to get the 1.2 with 130 horsepower and a bit more spec. However, what about this one, the e-Tense electric version? Well, you can get into EV motoring for just under €32,000 after all the available grants. This one, as it sits here, is the all singing, all dancing version. This will cost you €36,603, and it has everything. Okay,
Okay, so what's the C4 like to drive? Well, given the fact that it's a Citroën, we can make some assumptions, and we're probably not too far off. And the first thing you notice is that the steering is very light, the controls are very light, the pedal feel is quite squishy, and the ride is very compliant, and that's something that we'd be all quite familiar with from Citroëns of old. This is a very comfortable car. These seats are excellent. Now, Citroën made a lot of fuss in their press conference about how these seats have extra memory foam and are much thicker, and you do really feel it in your backside. It's a massively comfortable seat, and this would be a nice place to spend a lot of time in. Long journeys in this car, I imagine, would be really quite nice. And then obviously it's an EV, so it's quiet. You're not getting much in the way of feedback from either the steering or from the audible clues in the car. So overall, adding those two together, you get a car that doesn't give you an awful lot in terms of senses. However, as an EV, this is very good. I've noticed over the course of the few days, we've had this car for about 3 days, that we've been returning about 16.3 kilowatts per 100 kilometre. And that means that despite us driving pretty much at 120 kilometers per hour on motorway for most of the time we've spent in this car, this has returned that figure. And that really means that on average per fill in this car, you'd be getting about 307 kilometers on a full charge. And the WLTP figure for this is 350 kilometers. So that's quite good. Like, we really weren't trying with this car. We were just driving it aircon on up and down the motorway, and it was returning that sort of number. So if you were much more careful, if you were driving in an urban environment, or if you were a little bit more careful with your aircon and your motorway speeds or motorway use, you'd really do well in this car. I think the range would be quite consistent. I think you'd be up there more towards 320, 330 habitually.
Just a little bit on the standard specification of the C4, the regular model. It starts off at €24,740, and for that you get the 1.2 litre petrol engine with 100 horsepower, and it comes with the so-called Feel Pack, which comes quite well equipped really. Even at that entry point, you're getting 18-inch alloy wheels, a 10-inch touchscreen, rear parking sensors, cruise control, air conditioning, and a leather multi-function steering wheel. Jump under $3,000 and you move into the 130 horsepower version with the Feel Pack, adding the connected nav, smart pad, connected cam, which is sort of a dash cam which you can record road incidents on, and a head-up display. Okay, so how about some conclusions? Well, look, Citroën have really lifted their game with this C4. It's a much, much better car than the one it replaces. However, if you're going for one of these, I think the best bet would be possibly the 1.2 petrol with 130 horsepower. It's about the right balance between price and specification. However, if you do want an EV, this is now a very good one. It starts off at under €32,000, which is great for an EV these days. Pricing still hasn't come down to the level where it's going to be really open to everyone. However, this pricing is good, the specification is good, and if you're in that market for an EV and you're in that sort of budget price range, then this is really worth a look.